Hello, today I'm going to be talking about public transport in France, which has been requested by a couple of people, and it's something really useful that you're going to definitely be needing to know about if you're going to be a language assistant in France as part of the TAPIF program. Obviously, most Americans are not going to be bringing a car with them to France or buying a car when they're in France. So this stuff is really crucial and necessary if you don't want to be stuck in your little town all the time, if you're in a small town. Obviously, if you're in a big city, you also need to be using public transportation, so it's something everyone needs to consider. So if you are in the TAPIF program, as soon as you find out your city, I would look up their public transportation options and just take a look at the choices that you have. So in France, public transportation is significantly better than it is in most of the US. If you live in a big city, you might have good public transportation, but if you live in a smaller town, you probably don't have very extensive public transportation. So first of all, you have trains, which is the major transportation for going longer distances. Trains are definitely more popular in France than they are in the US. You have different types of trains, and some of them are regional, so I don't know about all of the different types, but you have the TGV or TGV, Train Grande Vitesse, which is high-speed trains. And these type of trains are going to be taking you longer distances, so they go through all of France, and they are really fast and efficient. They're pretty comfortable. I find that the trains in France are typically more comfortable than even like an airplane. So I really like them. They can be expensive. A lot of people seem to think that traveling by train in Europe is super, super cheap, and it can be, but not necessarily. It's not as cheap as some people would leave you to believe, I guess, especially if you're going to be traveling last minute. You really need to make those plans ahead of time if you're going to be going long distances. So you also have different regional trains. The regional train in Brittany is called TER or TER, and you have some trains called Intercity also, and these are more even smaller areas that typically will do a route back and forth between certain major cities in a certain area. And they can also be buses, the Intercity. But basically what I was going to say is if you're traveling within your region, you don't need to plan that ahead of time. You can do it last minute and it'll cost you the same as if you planned it ahead of time. So I live in Brittany. If I want to travel within Brittany, I don't need to plan it weeks in advance. I can decide the day before to go and it'll cost me the same price typically. You might have some exceptions, but typically it won't be that expensive. However, if I decide that I want to go to Paris for the weekend, I'm going to be paying a lot of money. It can be really expensive. One time I got stuck in Paris and we missed our train. We had to buy new tickets the next day, and they cost 75 euros to go from Paris to Rennes, which is about 2.5 hours by train, so it's not that far. 75 euros is over $100. It's a lot of money to pay to go such a short distance, so make sure you're planning things ahead of time, or they can get really expensive, especially if you're traveling long distances. So don't always assume that train travel is going to be super, super cheap. Make sure you plan that ahead of time. The other popular transportation that you'll probably be using is buses, and you should know in French there are two words for bus. One is just bus and one is autocar. And typically, if people are talking about le bus, it means a bus within a certain city or region. If they talk about autocar, it's just a bus, like a coach bus, but usually that's going between different cities, like a longer path with less stops. So, if that makes sense. Most major cities have a bus system, and depending on your areas, they might be more or less frequent. In the town I live in, it's part of the Lorient bus system. The stops here are less frequent than the stops within Lorient in the actual city. So you can look online for your bus systems. They're going to be different for every city and region. So you can just type in bus for the name of your city and see what pops up on Google. And they'll have certain special names and different things. The website for the one here in Lorient is ctrl.fr, and the one in Rennes was star.fr, and their system is called Star Métropole. So each city has different names for their systems, and they're usually fairly easy to navigate. The most important thing for bus routes is when you go to the bus stop, the routes will be posted with the numbers of the buses and the names of the stops. So it's most important to make sure you're going the right direction, because every stop has typically 2 directions. So make sure you're not on the wrong side of the road at the wrong direction. You can just check, and usually it'll say the direction of the bus is going from this place to another place. And usually for the directions, it'll only list the last stops. So the last place it stops, it'll list. So you need to know, when you're looking on the list of stops, look at the last one. So you know that's what you're going towards, and that's the direction that you want. If you're not sure if you're going the right way or you're on the right bus, just ask the driver. They will usually know their route really well, and they'll be able to tell you. Just say, know the name of the stop you need, and say, are you stopping at this stop? So obviously you're going to have bus systems within major cities and their surrounding cities. You also have regional buses. The ones in Morbihan, which is the area of Brittany where I live, they're called TIM, T-I-M, and you'll have different ones for every department. That's the name, I guess. So Morbihan is a department of Brittany. There are 4 departments in Brittany, and the department bus in Morbihan, they're very affordable, and they go between quite a few cities, and they're only €2 each way. So they're very practical and affordable. So you definitely want to look into the bus systems in your department. That'll be really helpful if you want to travel on a budget. Sometimes it can be a better option than the train because you can save a lot of money that way. So that's something you should definitely look into also. So those are going to be the 2 most popular modes of transport, is buses and trains. If you live in certain cities, you might also have a metro, which is really handy. I lived in Rennes and they had a metro there, and I really loved it. The metro is it's fast and it's easy. It's a really nice way to navigate the city, I think. I found the metro to be really useful for orienting myself within the city, because it's really easy if you know the different stops of the metro and you know what is by each stop. It's really easy to orient yourself within the city. Another thing I love about the metro is they tend to be pretty regular. You might have buses that come only every 15 minutes or even less, depending on where you live. The metro in most cities that have a metro, they have it because they have pretty steady traffic. And so the metro tends to come every few minutes, so that's really nice. I really prefer the metro. And they're less likely to be running late. Depends on the city. In Paris, they have a bigger system, so the bigger the system is, the more likely you are to have problems. The one in Rennes was automated, and it was quite reliable. So I really enjoyed that. Metros, similar to buses, you're going to have make sure when you're going into the metro that you look at the signs posted, because they'll list the directions, and typically they'll list the names of the stops also. So make sure you're going in the right direction and looking at the signs. Not too complicated, but it can be difficult to get used to at first. But once you're used to it, metros and buses, they're all pretty easily navigable. Is that a word? They're easy to navigate, and they're very. I like public transportation in France most of the time. Then I was going to just talk quickly about Paris as well at the end, because I know a lot of people, most people, if they're coming from the US to France, you're going to pass through Paris. If it's your first time in France, you might want to take some time and visit Paris before moving to your smaller town for Tapif or your other city. So in Paris, you have the metro is the main means of transport. They also have a bus system, but I don't think it's necessary for tourists most of the time. One advantage of the bus system is that it does run later than the metro sometimes, depending on the areas. The metro in Paris stops around 1 o'clock, 1:15 on weekdays, and 2:15 on weekends. And that's not super late, but it's late enough to go out and enjoy a little bit. So the metro system in Paris is very complex, but again, it's not difficult to navigate if you know which direction you're going. What I like to do if when I'm traveling on the metro in Paris, I find the stop that I'm departing from and the stop I'm going to, and just look at the different places where you need to change lines before you get there. Sometimes there can be multiple ways to go because the lines intersect at different places and stuff. So just take a look, and always carry your metro map with you in Paris. I think it's really handy. There are metro stops all over the place. I found that if you get lost in Paris, you can kind of just keep walking until you find a metro stop, and then you're good. Once you find the metro stop, you're not lost anymore. In Paris, they also have the RER trains, and these are trains going longer distances, typically to the airports. So when you're coming from the airport, you're going to be you can take different modes of transportation from the airport. You can take certain buses which will stop at certain hotels or at different areas in Paris. The buses tend to be a little cheaper than the RER, but the RER will connect you with the metro system. So it depends where you want to go exactly, and the buses can take a bit longer as well. The airports are located kind of far out of the city, but typically I take the RER into the city and then switch to the metro. And one thing I would advise, if you are going to be going from the airport into Paris and then back to the airport, I would advise buying your RER tickets both ways at the airport, because sometimes it can be hard to buy them in the city depending on the metro stop. Certain stops don't allow you to buy certain types of tickets or to pay certain ways, so it can be a little tricky sometimes. So usually I'll buy both. If I know I'm going to be coming back to the airport, I'll buy both when I'm leaving the airport. Also, something you should know is if you are flying into Paris and then going to another city in France, you can take trains, TGV trains directly from the Paris Charles de Gaulle airport to other cities. So that might be more practical for you. If you don't have time or aren't interested in visiting Paris, then it's more practical than going into the city and then taking a train. So, because if you take the RER into the city, it does cost about 10 or 11 euros if I remember correctly. So I think the metro system in Paris is really good, and I like the public transport systems in France. The buses can be a few minutes late sometimes. Occasionally you'll have bigger problems. You should pay attention to if there are strikes. Sometimes that can cause some problems. The trains can run late occasionally, but overall I haven't had a lot of problems with them. Typically they are very timely and very practical for getting around in France. And I'm going to be doing another video more in depth on using trains in France. I've already filmed some of the footage for it, so I've just got to fill in a little more information for you guys, and I will be uploading that sometime. So let me know if you have any questions about transportation in France, more specific questions. And one more thing I want to mention, you can also, I think for most states, you can drive in France with a U.S. license. I have a friend here who is an au pair, and she drives in France with her U.S. license, and so you can rent a car here and you can drive if you wanted to do that for a weekend or something, for a trip. I've been told that you can rent cars fairly cheaply, but then someone was telling me that's only if you rent them for a long period of time, so it kind of depends. And also you should be aware, if you're planning on renting a car and driving in France, a lot of the cars in France, most of the cars are stick shift, so you should know how to drive stick shift if that's what you're planning to do. Or maybe you'll be able to pay a little extra and have the choice of an automatic. I'm not sure. I have not rented a car in France, but it is an option if you're wanting to take some excursions to places where there isn't public transport, or the timing doesn't work out with your schedule or that type of thing. So that's going to be all for today. So feel free to leave any questions that you have. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.